Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning on behalf of the people of Oulian, Despin, Gadet, Lapel, Larissus, Grand Ravine, Richford, Grand Rivière, Belmont, and Denier Rivière, to add my voice to the debate on the Appropriation Bill 2019-2020, also known to many as the budget or budget statement. Mr. Speaker, I must admit that in the parliamentary budget exercise, I tend to prefer the discourse on the appropriation bill more than the debate and exchanges on the estimates of revenue and expenditure. This appropriation bill debate is the debate in which we get to clinically dissect the policies and program proposals of the government, the programs that are meant to impact the citizenry in the short, medium, and long term. It is also at this juncture, Mr. Speaker, in the cycle of the Parliament, when the Prime Minister seizes the opportunity to inspire the nation and excite the populace about the government's work program for the ensuing period. Typically, Mr. Speaker, a budget statement ought to inspire the masses, give hope to those who have no hope, to be able to inspire them about their own circumstances. It is supposed to instill confidence across sectors and amongst all people. And very importantly, Mr. Speaker, a budget statement ought to engender a sense of belonging in the scheme of national development. As a people, we must feel that we are all in, and not some being mere bystanders in the well-orchestrated charade of FFF, family, friends, and undeserving foreigners. Mr. Speaker, what we heard on Tuesday evening was uninspiring. It lacked imagination. It was pale, and it was stale. In the Creole culinary lexicon, we call that a découché. And for those who do not speak or understand Creole, a découché is food usually left on the stove overnight, not even refrigerated. Then you heat it up next day for consumption. And the unsuspecting observers or onlookers might think that it is a freshly cooked meal, but it lacks freshness. It is still a découché. If not properly, Mr. Speaker, prepared, a découché can result in diarrhea and other food poisoning symptoms. It can get you sick. You become nauseous, and you don't feel good about what you've consumed. The budget statement presented by the Prime Minister on Tuesday night was an exercise in fluff and bluff, or what the member for Castries East and distinguished leader of the opposition has over time referred to as flashing mirrors. Mr. Speaker, I listened this morning to the member for Choiseul, and before him, some other members on the other side, as they made their contributions to the debate on the appropriation bill. Mr. Speaker, it is painful to watch grown, honorable men and women just toe the line for the sake of toeing the line. You can tell that some of them were not into it, Mr. Speaker. They did not buy into the appropriation bill. But in the interest of party, They had to stand up, speak, and glorify the emptiness and the empty promises that were made by the Honorable Prime Minister. The member for Castries Central, she chided the previous administration for having set up a vision commission. Mr. Speaker, there is absolutely nothing wrong with setting up a vision commission. And as a matter of fact, when the vision commission was set up, it was an opportunity to give some of the best brains and thinkers in this country an opportunity to influence the policies and the programs that the government was rolling out, devising and rolling out for the betterment of the people of St. Lucia. But instead, she attempted to ridicule the idea and say we had no vision to the extent that we had to put together a vision commission. But you know what they've done, Mr. Speaker, now that they're in government? To get a vision for themselves, they have to pay a company called Permandu millions of dollars to come and tell them what to do and what the needs of this country are. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, in his presentation, was taking St. Lucians for a ride. And I said earlier, his was an exercise in fluff and bluff. The Prime Minister and member for Mikud South has presided over the tourism industry in St. Lucia for 8 years, 5 as the line minister for tourism, and 3 as the Prime Minister of this country. And for the longest while, Mr. Speaker, when he had his cluster arrangement, he had line responsibility for the tourism portfolio, albeit being helped by a junior minister. 8 years at the helm of tourism policy formulation in this country. 8 years equivalent to 2 parliamentary terms that would qualify any parliamentarian, whether in the upper or lower house, to a pension. And in 8 years, this Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, has failed to add 1 additional room to the hotel stock of this country. But the Prime Minister was able to muster the courage on Tuesday night and eyeball St. Lucians, telling them that he will be building in this ensuing financial year 5 to 7 hotels. Mr. Speaker, when is that going to stop? And I saw members hitting the table because they are part of a mutual admiration clique. How can you build 5 to 7 hotels in 1 year when after 8 years at the helm of tourism policy formulation, you've not been able to add 1 single room to the hotel stock in this country? Mr. Speaker, that is the fluff and bluff. That is the mamagain of the average St. Lucian person. Mr. Speaker, this administration is one that takes pleasure in disrespecting the opposition. And I was hoping that when he presented the budget statement, the Prime Minister would have said more about issues of governance. Mr. Speaker, on my way to the Parliament this morning, there is a step program being run in my constituency. Bon matin, les moi quitter Kaimwe Kavini Parlement. L'année moun en Denry North qui a travaillé step. Et vous savez qui moun qui choisi, Mr. Speaker? They were chosen by members of the Denry North United Workers' Party constituency group. And as the parliamentary representative for Denry North, Mr. Speaker, I did not have the opportunity to select a single worker. I stopped by the playing field this morning and I saw them, they were at work. And I'm happy for them, Mr. Speaker, that they're able to get to do something that will put some money in their pockets. But Mr. Speaker, again, the office and the authority of the parliamentary rep is being usurped so that one set of individuals can look to score cheap political points. And I know what the retort has been. You all used to do it too. That has been the retort, that has been the refrain. Disrespect reciprocated is even more disrespectful and evil than disrespect itself. Disrespect reciprocated is even more disrespectful and evil than disrespect itself. And in the creation of this new St. Lucia that we've been told about, there's no place for that kind of behavior. If it was wrong, and it is wrong, you have an opportunity to right the wrong. You cannot justify wrong by telling me somebody else did wrong. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy, as I said, for those persons who working STEP this morning. But if you are a supporter of the St. Lucia Labour Party, you will not be benefiting from the STEP program. And I suspect, Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, it is all part and parcel of trying to undermine the office of the parliamentary rep, hoping that it will give a political advantage to people on the other side. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia is being governed today by the worst government our country has ever seen. The largest cabinet in the history of this country. They've experimented with a cluster approach whereby the Prime Minister would have been able to exercise control over individuals whom he believed would have challenged some of the policies and the programs that he wanted to roll out. And to the credit of some on the other side, notwithstanding what they say today, they did try to stand up for the country. And some of them have demonstrated, Mr. Speaker, that whereas they're not prepared to wash their dirty linen in public, but you get word that some of them are willing to stand up. But it cannot be enough to just stand up in silence. You have to come out and let your voice be known, especially when your conviction is one where you are working or doing things or taking a position in the best interest of the people of this country. He told us when he came in that he was going to run the country like a business. And we are seeing that at work today. And I've said previously that the only time you ought to liken the running of a country to a business is when you are looking to maximize efficiency and to cut wastage. Running a country as a business means that you are only concerned about your profit margins. Save money here and make money here and put money over there. But Mr. Speaker, you must understand that in a country, you have to be prepared to spend money on social programs that may not necessarily bring back direct economic returns. And that is why we have not been able to understand, some of us in here, that there are people in this country, no matter what we say in here, no matter how many businesses we've run ourselves and how much money we have and what we know about money, there are people who woke up in St. Lucia today, this morning, and they will wake up again tomorrow morning, and they will not be in a position to fend for themselves. And it is for that reason, you must always ensure that you spend money on the social programs just to see to it, Mr. Speaker, that these people get by. Mr. Speaker, I saw a businessman at work on Tuesday night. I saw a salesman. I saw a boardroom presentation. Endless optics, teleprompter, cameras, lights. The optics were good, but it was short of substance. And according to the member from Castries South, it was devoid of substance. What I wanted to see instead, Mr. Speaker, was a prime minister. A prime minister demonstrating concern for the plight of the average St. Lucian. I wanted to see a country leader. I wanted to see in his disposition, if not in his natural features, a reflection of the St. Lucian people and their struggles, Mr. Speaker. But I did not see that. And so, Mr. Speaker, I have to conclude that St. Lucia is being run by the worst prime minister ever. Mr. Speaker, it was the member for Ancillary late last night who attempted to underscore the challenges of small island developing states, of which we are part. The economic plight or situation of small island developing states like St. Lucia, the world over, is one that is critical and must be managed carefully. The advent of globalization, Mr. Speaker, means that small countries like St. Lucia have to fend for themselves. Trade issues have come about since globalization. We've seen the loss of preferential treatment on certain markets. And we are existing, Mr. Speaker, in an environment that is better suited for developed and metropolitan countries. Aid is dwindling. And what do these countries do in all regions of the world? Mr. Speaker, they resort to belt tightening measures. Un petit pays comme celui-ci, pas seulement Caraïbes, mais tout partout en la terre, ces pays ça qui sont pays plus difficile aujourd'hui pour ménager affaires yo. Puisque pas ni ces si pour tenir from gros pays comme avant. Et que tous ces pays ça, à Caraïbes et puis à l'autre côté de la terre, yon c'est premier démarche là yo kapon. C'est pour le gouvernement et pour les premiers ministres venir et puis dire ces gens pays that yon ni pour mawe yo, yon ni pour ouais qui yo pas gaspiller bagay so that pays ça aller devant. Mr. Speaker, in a situation and an environment like this, government must lead by example. The government has to take the lead. And Mr. Speaker, do we see that happening in St. Lucia? Things have become particularly acute for some Caribbean countries. Trinidad, Barbados, Antigua, Grenada, they all have had their problems in recent times. No Caribbean island is doing well. None is doing well. It is a case of who is less ill, who is doing better, but they're all sick in terms of their fiscal health. They are all sick, Mr. Speaker, not doing well. And what do we see in St. Lucia in response to that reality? We are saddled by astronomical debt and rampant social problems. This is what you get when the fiscal situation of a country begins to deteriorate. When the monies are not there to roll out the programs, Mr. Speaker, you begin to see all the social nightmares raising their ugly heads. The murder rate goes up, unemployment goes up, people become apathetic, people begin to have misgivings about the governance system, people begin to give up, Mr. Speaker, and people begin to lose their identity, and as a result, their national pride begin to suffer. But Mr. Speaker, in spite of all the situations that I've mentioned, you do better when a government takes the lead and the people follow. And I've said before that who swims and who sinks has a lot to do, if not everything, about the quality of the leadership that you provide in difficult times. And nobody in here, if not for political expediency, can tell me that this current Prime Minister is the best man for the job, given the situation that we are in right now. Mr. Speaker, we have seen unprecedented levels of wastage. I mentioned the oversized and bloated cabinet, the highest cabinet wage bill in the history of St. Lucia, the highest travel bill in the history of St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, this administration has spent more monies in ministers traveling overseas in 3 years than the previous administration did in 4.5 years. Mr. Speaker, and then the Prime Minister wants to come and tell us that things are okay. We ought not to be griping. St. Lucia is doing well. He claims that he is a friend of the marginalized and the poor, notwithstanding all the policy proposals and all what has been done tend to favor those who already have, particularly those from overseas. This is the same government that closed Radio St. Lucia, the Fish Marketing Corporation, the same government that moved in on mothers, unemployed mothers, who are resorting to a tray on a sidewalk to feed their children and to take care of their families on a Sunday on Mother's Day. Who has the conscience and the heart, Mr. Speaker, to move in on mothers single mothers on Mother's Day, and you take their tray and you go and dump it somewhere and ask them to go and claim it because they're in the way of tourists and other people? Where is the conscience and the heart, Mr. Speaker? But you're preoccupied, and that is not important, but you're preoccupied with building 5 to 7 hotels in 1 year, when after 8 years, you could not add a single room to the existing hotel stock in the country when you were the lead policy person in the tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, wastage unprecedented. Millions of dollars paid to Pomandu to come and tell the government how to go about its business. 10 million for Ojo Labs. $24 million for one hotel. And we've heard surrogates of this government trying to refute that as to whether they were owing the monies directly or whether it is monies that they collected on behalf of government. But the $24 million that was allowed to stay in the coffers of one hotel can never be acceptable at a time when you are asking the average St. Lucian to resort to belt-tightening measures. And in an official letter, with the government's letterhead, Mr. Speaker, cited as a reason for closing the Fish Marketing Corporation, the economy is bad, and things are not running in the economy. Words to that effect. I don't know if it is the same economy that is supposed to be doing so well. Mr. Speaker, we cannot reinstate the distress fund. We are asking at a time when we're supposed to be doing well, and the revenue streams are doing great, Mr. Speaker, by way of collection. We are silently going to the South Louis Community College and ask the next generation of leaders to pay more for education. And when people began to frown on that, they quietly, Mr. Speaker, backpedaled, and they allowed the board to take the flak from the public. Why do we have to allow a hotel to retain $24 million and we can't pay CXC fees for the Form 5s at the different secondary schools in this country, Mr. Speaker? How can that be acceptable, Mr. Speaker? CHTTI, a lot has been said about CHTTI. $10 million. Fireworks, almost $1 million. The Packer Company, $12 million. And I will say, as I've said in this house before and elsewhere, there is absolutely nothing that the Packer Company brings to sporting infrastructural upgrade in this country that cannot be done by the locals. Nothing, Mr. Speaker. And the member for Castries South would have reminded you in a previous sitting that when the background check was done on that company, they had no experience in sporting infrastructural management or upgrade, but instead they were functioning almost like a travel agency, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, almost $1 million for an audit of St. Jude's. Ernst & Young, $4 million. And the big one, Mr. Speaker, where the country is being saddled with even more debt, $400 million for airport redevelopment. When the rest of the world is going the way of PPP, and one of the main considerations that governments bring on board to go the way of PPP is to lessen the debt burden on the populace. When the United Workers' Party came in, they found the arrangement for the airport was already there. But, Mr. Speaker, it is more convenient for them to give contracts and to control the works as they see fit. And at the previous sitting, the member for Castries Southeast, you know what he said, Mr. Speaker? We were giving the airport to some company. Now, Mr. Speaker, had the airport been a podium or a chair, I can understand a country or a company taking St. Lucia's chair and go with it to a location that suits them. But where can they go with the airport? Where can they take the airport to? The airport will always belong to the people of St. Lucia. It is the operations of the airport, Mr. Speaker, that was being outsourced. But, Mr. Speaker, you need to understand, Mr. Speaker, that these are some of the amounts that have been wasted in 3 years. And nothing has been more refreshing in the pronouncements that have come from the other side than this morning when I heard that admission from the member of Choiseul. He admitted that this government has nothing to show in 3 years at the helm. I know what he said. He said it, yes, right here he said it this morning. And his pronouncement that the Prime Minister always asked for 3 years. When you won the campaign trail, you didn't ask for 3 years. You had all the solutions. And when you came in there, you were boasting of execute. What have you executed in 3 years? What projects do you have to show for your 3 years? Qui projet gouvernement flamboni pour moucher pour 3 l'année yo ja fait là. All you have done is to preside over the completion of projects that were started by the St. Lucia Labour Party administration. And Mr. Speaker, c'est pour vous manier yo kakawe l'année cérémonie pour finir projet nous. Yo ka inviter nous en déchet. But c'est mon pas couillon ça, Mr. Speaker. Cette liste pas couillon encore. Cette Lucien pas couillon encore. Yo savent qui moun qui fait qui ça et qui moun qui dépense l'argent pour faire qui ça by Jean cette Lucie. Mr. Speaker, the member for Ancillary during his presentation said, and referring to the Prime Minister, that he was a record-breaking Prime Minister. I think he was speaking more directly to tourism arrivals. That might be true, Mr. Speaker, that the numbers have increased. But what he did not tell us is that the Prime Minister has also broken the record for the Prime Minister to have borrowed the most money in such a short space of time. The debt level is unprecedented. And when the members opposite realize that we on the opposition side we've made a point that resonates, they will agree with you, but there will always be a caveat to distance themselves from what we see. The member for Castries South East said, Mr. Speaker, in a previous sitting, when he, Mr. Speaker, acknowledged that the debt situation was climbing at an unacceptable rate. You know what he said to justify it? He said, and I quote, St. Lucia has never had a problem paying its debt. But the fact that you have the capacity to pay today does not mean that you just have to borrow unnecessarily, Mr. Speaker. You're borrowing at a time when you are asking a hotel company to hold $24 million. You are borrowing at a time when you mess up a project and you have to pay back range 33 million. You are borrowing at a time when you're paying 4 million to Ernst & Young. Mr. Speaker, that cannot be acceptable. And at the end of the day, all of us must take collective responsibility for that kind of recklessness. Mr. Speaker, there are many examples in the Caribbean for us to follow. Guyana had their problems. Jamaica had their problems. And more recently, the worst case in the Caribbean is the Barbados situation. And when some civil society organizations were asking Barbadians, educated Barbadians as well as the average citizen in Barbados, to pay attention to what is happening in the economy and how the government was managing the business of the country. Some said that was not their business, allow the government to do their work. But when it had gotten out of control, people from every sector in the Barbados economy or in the community was being made to pay. People who had been comfortable in jobs for years were getting notices that, look, in order to put Barbados back on a growth path, we have to retrench. And some of them, in their Bajan accent, were telling their friends how they've never been in politics. I can't say it like a Bajan. But they were saying, Mr. Speaker, that they were not in the politics. But it did not matter. They had to resort to massive retrenchment of workers in government agencies and statutory corporations. And today, some of them, Mr. Speaker, are literally losing their sanity. St. Lucia is not yet there. I'm not saying St. Lucia will be there tomorrow. All I am trying to say is that we have to take cognizance of what has happened in Barbados and elsewhere to ensure that we do not find ourselves there. And I am saying that given the rate at which we are borrowing, Mr. Speaker, if somebody does not take stock, we, Mr. Speaker, will find ourselves there. And it will pain me, Mr. Speaker, to see that the next generation will end up paying for the recklessness of men and women who should have known better. Mr. Speaker, loss of property in Barbados, loss of jobs, loss of income, deteriorating infrastructure, because Barbados, as we speak now, their debt servicing situation is so bad that for every dollar the Barbados government makes, at least 60 cents of that money must go to loan financing, servicing, sorry, or debt financing, Mr. Speaker. So it leaves the government with 40 cents. Situation bad, because government bad take a prêter l'argent, qu'on y pas mêler. Et jodi a bad taper qu'on dans situation, Mr. Speaker, qu'on pour chaque dollar gouvernement bad fait, il y a pour 60 cents dans l'argent ça pour payer dette. Et l'autre 40 cents là, il est pour faire chimé, il est pour manger l'école, il est pour manger playing field, il est pour payer moun qui travaille par le gouvernement. Et c'est pour l'État c'est chimé. C'est pour manière crime là take over babad pour le moment, Mr. Speaker. Et ça c'est là où ça tape comment dit dans là ou pas manager ça fort bien. You toujours do on the side ça, we are prophets of doom and gloom. But we have a responsibility. Not just to the 37,000 who voted for us. We have a responsibility to this country. All of us, and I've said it before, have a responsibility to this country. So when we come, Mr. Speaker, and we point out what we believe are the ills of the government, members on the other side ought to take it for what it is meant, embrace it, reflect on it, and come again. The member for Ancillary, in his deliberations last night, Mr. Speaker, on his contribution, he said that we were only criticizing and we were not suggesting solutions to problems. Mr. Speaker, we suggested between 2011 and 2016. We suggested in government. We suggested in the parliament. We suggested through press releases. We suggested on a campaign trail. They were rejected. And it was your suggestions that they embraced. So today, you have a responsibility to give expression in a tangible way to the things that you promised and the things that you postulated when the shoe was on the other foot. But after 3 years, you have nothing to show. Absolutely nothing. And now you will hear the excuse that the Prime Minister had always asked for 3 years. To do what? You've wasted free. And you want to waste more? Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister on pages 22 and 23 spoke about citizen safety and security. Mr. Speaker, we have seen clearly what the thinking of this government is. This government places foreigners before St. Lucians. All of what you see happening at the Castries City Council and giving additional powers to the city police, it is not about keeping St. Lucian safe. And I will say objectively that everything we have to do to ensure the security of the visitors who come to the St. Lucia, we must do it, Mr. Speaker. But the additional powers that were given to the city police, where they can roam the entire country, where their powers of arrest are not confined only to the city, this was done with one thing in mind: to ensure that they provide cover for the tourists who would visit the different waterfalls in all the rural parts of the country. This was not done because the government recognized a need to provide security for the average St. Lucian. Island-wide powers to arrest so that the tourists, Mr. Speaker, can be covered. That is why, and I said it is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but that is the thinking behind this. Mr. Speaker, they have attempted to usurp the authority of the police commissioner. And when the police commissioner has stood his ground on certain matters, we've been told of the condescending way in which the high command of the police force is being treated. Mr. Speaker, we need to do more. We need to do more for security in this country. And we on the side have been given a perfect opportunity to play politics with security and crime. But the St. Lucia Labour Party, as a party and as a responsible opposition, we have always resisted the temptation to play politics with crime. Mr. Speaker, last year was a good year for us to have jumped on the situation and looked to score what I call dustbin political points. But we did not. And when the leader of the opposition was invited to a crime symposium, he did not turn his back and say, it is a problem for you to deal. He went. And at every opportunity, the St. Lucia Labour Party has cooperated with the government on matters of security. But you know what was said when they were in opposition? This Prime Minister, member from Mikud South, he said that Kenny Anthony cannot solve crime in this country. But I can, and I will. And as soon as he said it, Mr. Speaker, we saw a record-breaking number of murders in a given year. And it doesn't matter who the Prime Minister of the day happens to be. This is something we all must frown on. But you do not play politics when it is convenient with crime and security. You do not play politics. Ou pas qu'à jouer politics. Il dit, later, on the outside, like both the government, that Kenny pass a solve crime. Il ça solve crime, excellent qui solve. Mais concernant to Mr. Speaker, nous avons cette ici record 60 moun tapé tué en yon l'année. Mr. Speaker, the police need to be given all the resources and support that they deserve. I believe some of the hardest working public servants in this country are police officers. They may not enjoy the best working conditions, but the majority of them have to leave young families behind. And in the midnight hours, they find themselves in all kinds of compromising communities and pockets, trying to keep the peace, putting their lives on the line, not having a guarantee that they will return home, Mr. Speaker. So any resource, any amount of resources put towards security and crime and helping the police, we will welcome that. But you have seen on social media 2 days ago how a police vehicle was in distress. And many have resorted to make light of it, Mr. Speaker. It is a situation that is regrettable. It is the kind of situation you do not want to put your police officers in, Mr. Speaker. Their dignity and their pride must be preserved. And we owe a great debt of gratitude, notwithstanding the condescending way in which some of them have been treated. Co-police, par une chance pour faire travail là où supposé. But we must say, Mr. Speaker, a special thank you and hats off to Commissioner Mosheri for his stewardship at the helm of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Deputy Commissioner Daisy as well, Milton, ACP Pelius, O'Brien, ACP Shalry, superintendents who have acted as ACPs every now and then, Nicholas, Seeley, Philip, female Daisy, all the hard-working gazetted officers and general members of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, Mr. Speaker. We have to take our hats off to those men and women. And Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me to compliment the police. And they're working under a lot of stress. Nobody wants the police to be operating under stress. You want at all times for your police officers to be operating with a free mind. There was a situation that confronted the country. Promises were made to the police that we will make impacts disappear. We will make impacts disappear. But what about ORC? And as I said, Mr. Speaker, it is not something that I like to talk about. But there's nothing I want to see more than for the police officers, whether they're connected to or not, to be allowed to go about their daily duties with a free mind. All of us in here, Mr. Speaker, must come together to ensure that we relieve the police of that stress. We have to ensure that we relieve them of that stress. But I will say something to some officers. Be a professional at what you do. Discharge your responsibilities objectively and without fairness. But do not allow yourselves to be used by politicians. Some have complained that as far as they're concerned, Mr. Speaker, meritocracy has gone out the window as far as promotion is concerned. And you hear these days, Mr. Speaker, where ministers are having their own list of people to be promoted. And Mr. Speaker, in a small society like ours, it is not difficult for the talk to make the rounds. So you can almost predict who's next on the promotion list. And if you are not satisfied with what you're hearing, you just have to take a look at some Facebook pages. And when you see certain individuals being promoted, you know exactly where the talk is coming from. Some of my best friends are police officers. Some of the persons I've known for the longest while, Mr. Speaker, as associates are police officers. But I don't think enough was said. And you should not hit your chest that you give the police vehicles. That's a given. The police need vehicles. You must give the police vehicles. You must give the police vehicles. But stop interfering in the operations of the police force. Stop transferring senior police officers because they take a position on principle and they will not facilitate your political agenda. You can unceremoniously move them at any time of day. How can you be contributing to the morale of the police force when you behave in such a high-handed way? And they come, Mr. Speaker, and they tell you the stories. They tell you the stories. But you know what has happened, Mr. Speaker? A lot of them are professionals. They will not cower. You move them, they will go to wherever you send them. But they will continue to discharge their responsibilities without fear or favor. They will continue to be professionals. Mr. Speaker, I hear people at times want to blame the police for crime. The police is not responsible for crime. Crime is a result of your social circumstances. However, the police have a role to solve crime and to minimize crime, tactically. But when you have dysfunctional families, we do not teach our children right from wrong. You can deploy 10 million police officers. If the mindset is not changed, we will have little criminals on our hands, Mr. Speaker, and the figures will continue to escalate. So don't just stay there. You remove all the social programs. You don't have an appreciation for the poor. You don't understand that there are going to be marginal communities. All the social programs are removed. And when crime begins to manifest itself, you want to hold the police responsible. That is wrong. Put the social programs. Let us go into the communities. Let us engage the people, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we produce better citizens, law-abiding citizens. But you cannot, Mr. Speaker, tell me that once you go into improve your deployment of officers in hotspots or over the country, Mr. Speaker. I'm okay, you know, Mr. Speaker. Once, Mr. Speaker, you are saying to me that your solution to crime is to deploy police.
Honorable members. I think it's getting a little too loud now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was making the point that the men and women at Chesterfield, Mr. Speaker, they are doing their best in the circumstances. And it is unfair to just look at the high command of the police force and hold them at ransom for the crime situation we have in this country. If we do not teach our children right from wrong, if we don't have the necessary social interventions in communities, we will continue to battle crime, we will continue to increase the deployment of officers, and we will not get the desired results. Quim apeya parafet peace police parafet travail. Crime is a mindset. Lawlessness is a mindset. We have to learn to teach our children right from wrong. And if it means that we have to revisit the school curriculum to achieve that objective, let us do it. But do not come and hold the police high command at ransom because crime figures are spiraling out of control. That cannot happen, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we heard the pronouncement time and
Remember,
again.
you have 15 minutes.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Come.
Kenny cannot stop crime, but I will. Under his watch, the member for Me Good South, he has had the most murders under his watch in a given period than any other prime minister in the history of this country. But he said he should have known that he's not responsible because he was attributing what was happening at the time to the member of Beaufort South's inability to manage crime. What has he done to curb crime? Mr. Speaker, this government continues to take the people of St. Lucia for a ride. I heard the Prime Minister's pronouncements on healthcare. A total of 162 million at all levels, $162 million. He's talked about, Mr. Speaker, a national health insurance. That too is découché. When the St. Lucia Labour Party administration attempted to bring about universal health care, it was criticized by members on the other side. It was criticized. They found everything wrong with the national insurance program that we were trying to roll out. But today, it is convenient for the Prime Minister to come and talk about making healthcare insurance available to all St. Lucians. Of course, I want to see all St. Lucians. But you know how the average St. Lucian goes about paying their medical bills, Mr. Speaker? Every weekend, in every single one of these 17 constituencies, there's a barbecue, there's a raffle, there's something. And the member from Choiseul told you this morning that almost every weekend on the Lafag or PI playing field, there's cricket or something where people are raising funds for citizens or constituents of his who are not able to meet their healthcare needs, Mr. Speaker.
Since 1997.
Mr. Speaker, the healthcare system is in shambles. This is the worst that it has ever been. Healthcare is not a priority for the United Workers' Party administration. Horse racing track is a priority. Hotel construction is a priority. But you cannot, none of you here, can stand up and objectively tell me, and you can't do it and you don't care. Because as a member would have said previously in this house, every one of you can hop on a plane and look after your needs. And your relatives can be cared for overseas. So I'm not surprised that this is not a priority for you. 3 years you found construction ongoing in a hospital, you stopped it. But during that 3 years when you can stop construction in a hospital, you have a horse racing track being constructed in close proximity. That is your preoccupation. You're not about healthcare. But not everybody, Mr. Speaker. There are constituents of mine who have watched loved ones die because they could not source help for them overseas. I'm reminded today, Mr. Speaker, as I speak of the healthcare situation, of a young man, Curtis Marius, of Denier Riviere in my constituency. Curtis was a dialysis patient. Curtis take out Denier Riviere, Austin Hill. Curtis take up bus la, en meter Denier Riviere, Barber Shelter. Ek bus la kame ate, Victoria. Ek ki ka ale hen dialysis li pou jounen. Gouvernement sa la vini, ek pou mouche dat yo pawe pou ve OKEU. Yo di yo kay provide se services sa la en OKEU. Ek Curtis te kata bekoy twete OKEU, Mr. Speaker. Ek tout moun, tous les jours savent de Curtis Vie, de Sanaville, à un dialysis. I ka vie moute en Valia, bon 6 ans. Mais even avant te sa vie, jou sa news te arrive en Valia, that Curtis more par the time te ka hen twete. And I am not a medical practitioner. I will not ascribe professional intelligence and know-how to myself that I do not have. But I heard the then president of the Medical Association say that the support services needed at the OKEU, when you are delivering certain services, the support structures were not there. And that may have been one of the reasons why the young man succumbed. I knew him very well, Mr. Speaker. He grew up in the same community as me. And today, this is a young man that we've lost. And if, Mr. Speaker, the healthcare situation was different, today he would have been here with us. Mr. Speaker, you can afford to say it's cheap, because I'm certain if you burst your toenail now, you can be rushed overseas. You don't understand your own constituency, let alone the plight of the people who you're supposed to represent.
On a point of order, the member is misleading the House because there were two opinions given. One of the president of the Medical and Dental Association and one of the person who was in charge of the unit. For the honorable member to admit that he does not have the professional competence, yet still would stand and flash a picture and say if the health situation was different, that this person would have been alive, is calculated and misleading in attempting to discredit the person who is charged by the state to run the renal unit at the OKEU hospital. And he needs to withdraw that statement, Mr. Speaker.
You don't deny the position.
What did I say?
Exactly. What did you say wrong? What did you say wrong?
How does that
Oh, honorable members. Member for Denrenoff, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we cannot refute the fact that the health system in this country is in shambles. And healthcare is not a priority for the United Workers' Party administration. Mr. Speaker, we are hearing of privatization of the healthcare system. That is the worst thing any government can do. When you begin to privatize the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, you are basically eliminating some sectors of your population. Privatization of healthcare means that ou bouzeni la han pou ou sawe docteur et pou taper kou traité. Et nous savons, Mr. Speaker, c'est pas tout le monde cette ici qui ni l'argent pour sa gen kou yo traité. Tapio provides excellent services, but it's a private entity, Mr. Speaker. And all private entities require the persons who come through their doors for services to pay. And I'm saying that when you privatize the OKEU, a lot of my constituents from Denrenoff, Mr. Speaker, will be left in the dark. You pas ni l'argent pour aller à l'hôpital, pour ça payer, pour ça l'hôpital kabay. The OKEU was a gift from the European Union, the largest infrastructure project in the Eastern Caribbean. And Mr. Speaker, today, because of this government's plans to privatize the OKEU, we are not getting aid from the EU. That is what the technical persons in the various land ministries are saying. Mr.
Speaker, again, I stand on a point of order. If the member is going to make an allegation as severe as that, then he would need to be able to provide proof that that's the case. If not, I would ask him to withdraw that, because I know of no statement by anybody from EU. In fact, I know the opposite, and that the EU had the same naming of the OKEU, because they could never open it, so they had to name it. And that is the time when there's a speech on record by the EU suggesting that they tried to privatize not the hospital, but some of the services that they have. I asked him to should have said that.
You see, Mr. Speaker?
Honorable member.
What's the point of order?
The statement that the EU is not funded very well.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw saying that. But Mr. Speaker, I suspect, given the changes we've seen in the estimates on the grants, where the EU, Mr. Speaker, the amounts that we were accustomed to getting from the EU has gone down. We rather suspect, Mr. Speaker, that may have been the reason. But Mr. Speaker, let me move on, Mr. Speaker, because time is against me. Mr. Speaker, the PM or the Prime Minister didn't have much to say on agriculture. But Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, I was hoping I would have heard from the other side, the commencement date.
Just do it for me. You have 5 minutes left.
I was interrupted severely.
No, go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I was hoping to hear the date when my farmers from Denrinoff, qui jouent le commencer à voir fig Martinique et puis France. But Mr. Speaker, Premier ministre n'a pas dit rien about ça. Mais yo allé avant ça pour dire que moun kay voir fig aller Martinique. Et quand moun a dit ça avant, parler avant moi que c'est même parlement pour du vote neuf. Les femmes attendent ça. En chaque femme qui a quitté yo, a planté fig. Because yo dit l'année market neuf et yo kay voir fig yo aller Martinique. First, Mr. Speaker. Mais on dit, Mr. Speaker, la pas de pièce market pour moun voir fig. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister spoke about sporting infrastructural upgrades. Mr. Speaker, I've said before, I am not opposed to upgrading sporting infrastructure in this country. I welcome it. I'm a former national player. My son is a current national player. I have a lot of friends who are national players. So anything you do to upgrade sporting infrastructure, I welcome it. Mr. Speaker, but it will be a sad day. I remember coming here and being excoriated. My name being smeared. You should see the memes on Facebook about me, national lotteries. But today, it saddens me to hear that the NLA will be merged with a gaming authority. And when that happens, as the leader of the opposition cited, we are suspecting that this is going to happen to facilitate horse racing. Yes. But I just hope, that in that arrangement, Mr. Speaker, that the original objectives for which the Lotteries Authority was created will not be lost. Where the people of St. Lucia, the young people of St. Lucia, will get resources for programming, equipment, and for infrastructure development, Mr. Speaker. Because I will tell you, Mr. Speaker, if at all they are sidelined to facilitate the horse racing dreams of some people in this honorable chamber, Mr. Speaker, we will not take it sitting down. I heard the member for Choiseul criticizing the lights at the different playing fields. Mr. Speaker, the lights that you will install on a national facility like the Darren Sami Stadium or the National Stadium will not be the same, of the same quality.
I did not criticize the lights at other playing fields, Mr. Speaker. What I said, Mr. Speaker, when the contract was issued to put in the lights in Choiseul, the minister told me he does not like the lights that have been selected for Choiseul. He took me to Dennery to see his lights, and he told me these are the lights that he's going to give Choiseul, Mr. Speaker. So please, honourable member, withdraw that statement.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member, he did not criticize the lights.
Mr. Speaker.
So just rephrase.
Yes. He mentioned it, Mr. Speaker. He didn't criticize it, but he mentioned it. To give the impression, Mr. Speaker, that the lights that we had installed elsewhere was not of good quality. But Mr. Speaker, the lights that have been installed in certain parts of the country, the technical people are saying to us that on any given evening, when you turn those lights on, you are looking at for one night, a bill of approximately $3,000 to $4,000. As we speak now, some of the lights that we install, Mr. Speaker, you are not paying more than $200 to $300 a night. I am all for the quality. You can take lights that are suited for a national stadium and put it in community fields. I welcome that. But all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, you have to look at economies of scale. And if that is the way you want to go, fine. But do not come and make it seem as if what we did was nothing. Mr. Speaker, the creative industries he spoke about, I want to take the opportunity very quickly to use the local parlance, big up, Mr. Speaker, some of the artists from the Dennery segment. A lot of them from my constituency. Terrell, Mr. Speaker, A.K. Young Boss, Jaim, Servants, Ampa, Mighty, Chinese, Silver Bullet, Young C, Pablo. All of them, Mr. Speaker, for continuing to keep the Valley's flag flying at the national level. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister speaks when it is convenient about everything. Sometime last year, he made a bold pronouncement. I was hoping to hear this year, in his budget statement, that plans were already advanced for the decriminalization of marijuana. And not just say things to appease and to excite a certain sector of the population. Mr. Speaker, if I had my way, I wouldn't come here this morning and tell you that I'm legalizing marijuana. what I would tell you in my own personal Shawn Edward capacity is that all young men, young, innocent men who are locked up at Bodley because they were intercepted with a joint and years of their lives being wasted away, if I had my way in a personal capacity, all of them would be walking out tomorrow morning, Mr. Speaker. All of them would be walking out. Mr. Speaker, it was another demonstration, as I said, the budget statement, of the Prime Minister's inability to manage the country and manage the affairs of this country. The poor and the marginalized have no hope with this budget. This is a budget for big business. This is a budget for hotels and hoteliers. This is a budget for foreigners. This is a budget for friends. This is a budget for family, Mr. Speaker. And I wish this morning there's nothing I would have wanted to do more than to stand here and tell you how strongly I feel about the budget and how inclined I am to support it, because I can see in this budget, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to tell you that I can see in this budget a new day for the people of Dennery North. But instead, I heard all health centers getting fixed. But today, the washing machine at the Richmond Health Center is dysfunctional. And the loads have to be taken to Dennery. But we're supposed to be told that with 1.5 billion exciting policies, a new day has come, and a new day a new day is on the horizon for the people of Dennery North. Mr. Speaker, this presentation of the budget, as I said, is another demonstration of the Prime Minister's inability to lead. He is not in sync with the reality of St. Lucia. His focus and his vision is elsewhere. And the time has come, Mr. Speaker, for us as a parliament to take stock of where we are and ensure that we not do things in a way that will result in St. Lucia finding itself where Barbados is today. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for your indulgence. Je voulais vous remercier tout le monde à Parlement pour manière que vous avez travaillé avec moi, Mr. Speaker. C'est my desire to work with you moving forward for a better life for the people of Dennery North. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.